देखो सब आ रहे हैं।
That no living creature must ever be sacrificed.
Is set in a Buddhist temple in Tibet. The story begins by introducing a teacher, or in Buddhism, usually called a lama, named Lama Norbu, who is teaching children about the concept of reincarnation, or rebirth, who, not long after, he received a letter from America containing a message about the appearance of a small child of Native American descent, who is predicted to be the reincarnation of the great teacher in this temple.
Have they found him? Perhaps.
Without wasting time, Norbu immediately left on the same day. And after saying goodbye to the elders, Lama Norbu was briefly intercepted by someone who looked like a wanderer who gave him a cup, which he said was the cup that was used by the teacher. Long story short, Lama Norbu arrived in New York City, United States, and was escorted by a Tibetan monk who happened to have been a teacher in America for 10 years. This monk was also the one who sent the letter about the appearance of the reincarnation of the great teacher. That it all started when he had a dream, a moment after the great teacher died. In the dream, the monk saw a small hill in a housing complex area. Suddenly, a house was built as fast as lightning, which, after validated and proven the truth of the hill and the house really exist in exactly the same as in his dream.
I saw Dad started to build a house 3 weeks ago.
The house Tarata is the home of an engineer's family who had just moved from another city, where the monk who was curious immediately met the engineer's wife, named, let's just call her, Mother, who turned out to be an elementary school teacher. So it was not difficult for the monk to get to know her day a sit.
Beautiful day.
Without feeling awkward, the monk immediately asked about the mother's family life, starting from her husband, who works as an engineer, and their only child, who is still 9 years old, named Jess, who, when asked when and what time Jess was born, the day and time were exactly the same as the time of the teacher's death.
Jessie!
Mrs. Conrad, you remember me?
Began. Everyone invited Leah Lama Norbu to Jessie's house, where they were greeted very well by the mother and invited to sit down, to wait until her husband came home from work.
We only just moved in a few weeks ago.
And this is Jessie's father, or let's just call him father, an engineer who was surprised to see two people with unusual appearances sitting in his living room. After being explained who they were, the father finally wanted to understand and sat down to listen to their explanation.
We believe that everybody is reborn. Again, particular people who... That is why we are here.
After explaining about the concept of reincarnation, or rebirth, Lama Norbu also openly said that Jessie, their son, might be the reincarnation of Lama Dorje, aka their great teacher in the Tibetan temple, because according to the instructions from the dream and the time of birth, Jessie met the requirements as the reincarnation of the great teacher Jay.
We are looking for his reincarnation.
Jessie, is that you? Come out. Come say hello.
He was shocked and couldn't believe it. The mother and father, who lived in the modern world and didn't believe in superstitious things, thought it was just a story and a fairy tale. Without having negative thoughts, the mother immediately introduced Jess, her son, to the two of them.
Come here. This is Jessie.
Do you like my mask?
In our country, we love masks.
That night, when Lamabu had come home this afternoon, the curious mother was still discussing the concept of reincarnation with her husband, who seemed to be drooling and not responding to the topic of conversation. In the end, It was revealed that this father worked for a boss who was his own close friend. But the last information he heard was that his friend was in debt due to his addiction to playing slots and karaoke, which resulted in financial problems, so that there was a possibility that his company would go bankrupt, which meant that the father would lose his job, which meant that their family might become poor like when they first got married. The next day on the train, Lama Norbu invited Jess to go to the museum to see the Buddha statue, where the mother herself had given permission for this and assigned a nanny to take care of Jess while she was outside.
He became a great horseman, a great archer,
and came home after a day at the museum. Jess, who was still a child and easily excited about new things, told the story of Buddha, including himself as the reincarnation of the great teacher. At first, the father was just sick of the presence of all these stories, but over time, he began to feel uncomfortable with the stories that he considered nothing more than fairy tales.
What kind of imagination he's got? He's gonna get confused. At least I don't believe in reincarnation.
The next day, according to Jess's request, the mother took her to the monastery where Lama Norbu lived in New York City because she had to teach. The mother said goodbye and that Jessie would be picked up by her father after work.
What's this?
it is a trumpet.
In the afternoon, the father came to pick Jessie up, but before going home, the father wanted to chat with Lama Norbu about all the fairy tales and myths that he had told his son, that they were considered to be able to interfere with his son's development and imagination. He was afraid that the father also wanted to emphasize that he himself did not believe in the concept of reincarnation at all, as Lama Norbu had told him the other day.
Why should you? In Tibet, we think of the mind and the body.
Lama Norbu immediately took a glass filled with tea and broke it when the container was broken. The tea water was destroyed. Was the tea water also destroyed? Of course not. The tea water spilled and moved to another place, just like humans. The body is just a container or shell. When the body dies, it doesn't mean that the soul or spirit also dies. It will remain intact and eternal, and only move to another dimension or container.
It moves from one body to another, but it is still mind.
He quickly explained to his wife that he only wanted to make sure that Jessie was the reincarnation of his great teacher. He had no personal interests. Lama Norbu only wanted to invite Jessie to go to Tibet to perform a ritual and meet the elders to make sure that the spirit of the great teacher was really in Jesset Nap's body.
To take a child away from his family in this country we call kidnapping.
Special delivery for Lama Norbu.
Hearing that his son would be taken to a very far place certainly made the father even more reluctant. He quickly invited his son to go and forbade Lambu to meet him again.
Jesse,
Say goodbye, Jesse.
don't forget your book.
On the way home, the father was immediately reprimanded for not being able to maintain his morals in front of Lambu when he just got news of the death of his boss, who was in debt so that it was over. Saya's career at the company was certain that he would fall into poverty, including his official house, which would definitely be confiscated.
Oh, God. In San Francisco.
When he got home, the father immediately told his wife about the fate of his job, with the fact that for the next few weeks, everything will be complicated, like meeting lawyers for unfinished projects and taking care of this and that, other things when the boss dies. The father, who is afraid, will be stressed to go far away by accepting Lama Norbu's invitation, who wants to invite Jessie to go to Tibet in the Himalayas. Not going straight to Tibet, they first went to the Kathmandu area in India to meet another candidate who is also believed to be the reincarnation of the great teacher, where the boy is named Raju, a very smart Amin boy who was given a Game Boy as payment for his appearance.
You're
Has told us much about you. Now we must visit a third.
After finding Raju, they went to another remote area to meet the third candidate, who is also believed to be the reincarnation of the great teacher. This time, the candidate is a little girl who is no less smart than Raju and Jessie.
Eat me! Oh, poor They're so hungry!
In short, Jessie and the two candidates finally arrived at the Tibetan temple and were immediately greeted by all the students there. While the three candidates were playing together, the Lama Orbu students immediately met an elder to perform a ritual to determine who among the three would be the reincarnation of the great teacher. And guess who among these three children was chosen? Not only to Raju, Saya also approached the little girl and prostrated herself at his feet. Who knows who the reincarnation of the great teacher is? Actually, to the Lama Norbu then approached Jessie and also prostrated to her. What turns out, there has been a rare phenomenon when one soul enters three different bodies. This may be rare, but it is said to have happened in the past. This is called an incarnation that is separate from the body of speech and mind. So, in other words, these three candidates are the reincarnation of the great teacher, who will later lead the Tibetan temple in the future. When Jessie and the two candidates were being taken to the hall to perform the abetting ritual, the father approached the Lama Orbu, who looked sickly. He then sat down to meditate in the warehouse with the father, who secretly lay down beside him. While the father was sleeping, that's when he dreamed about 2,500 years ago, when a queen from an ancient Indian kingdom was heavily pregnant. Who knows what was happening to her? The queen suddenly had a craving to go into the forest alone, who was in an unconscious state. The queen began to feel cramps, a sign the baby is about to give birth. And amazingly, a tree suddenly bends as if to provide assistance for the smooth delivery.
Bent slowly down to protect her.
The queen gives birth to a very healthy baby boy, so healthy he immediately smiles at the queen who gave birth to him. Who knows who this boy really is? Another miracle happens when the baby can immediately walk on both feet and leave a footprint in the form of tarat flowers growing on his footprints. On the step, the king gives his son the name Siddhartha, which means he who brings goodness. Where a very respected holy hermit suddenly sheds tears after seeing the prince's face. Siddhartha doesn't want to worry the queen. The hermit quickly explains that his tears are not tears of sadness, but tears of emotion and happiness. Because at his current age, the hermit will not live long enough to learn from the teachings that will be brought by Prince Siddhartha.
Who knows that he will not live long enough to learn from the teachings of your son?
Curious what his son will be in the future, the king asks, "If my son will become a famous king?" The hermit answers, "If he wants, your child can even become a ruler of the world."
The gods often betray the wishes of mortal men.
Did not accept the statement the king, who wanted Siddhartha or his son to be the successor of the king, later remained firm with his wishes and ignored his words.
He will be a king! He will be a great king!
1 week later, the queen was struck with a strange, deadly disease that caused her to die immediately. So, since that day, the king promised never to let his son leave the house, never to introduce him to pain and suffering in order to keep his mental health and become a king. 25 years passed. Siddhartha finally grew into a handsome and dashing prince. Because his father, or the king, was so fond of Siddhartha, he never saw the real outside world. All the facilities were deliberately provided. Stomachs were made full. Brains were made not to think, so that Siddhartha never knew what suffering was like.
He's given us everything we could want.
I must see the world, Yashodhara.
One day, when Siddhartha was meeting his people, who were mostly young and under 30 years old, Siddhartha, for the first time, accidentally saw two old grandfathers and immediately called his aide to explain. Who are they both?
Why do they look like that?
They are old, my lord.
What do you mean, old?
In the end, he happens to us all, my lord.
No, my lord. Don't go there, please. You mustn't.
Siddhartha also just found out that humans can get sick and feel the suffering of prolonged death because, as far as he knew, while in the palace, he had never been sick, even once.
She is very sick.
Sick?
No one reaches the moment of death.
Even kings?
The of Death Kings not only saw the suffering of sick people for the first time in his life, Siddhartha also saw the body of someone who had died with his sad family members, which unconsciously Siddhartha shed tears, feeling sadness for what he saw that day. Siddhartha learned about suffering and found compassion. They were him, and he was them. After knowing the real reality, Siddhartha immediately met his father to ask about why all this time his father had hidden the existence of the suffering of disease, poverty, old age, and death. The father answered,
If I've lied to you, Siddhartha, it has been because I love you.
Yes, the king did that out of love, and his feelings for his child without realizing that what he did was making Siddhartha seem imprisoned by the fact that there is a lot of suffering out there. Siddhartha is determined to go wandering in order to find answers and solutions to suffering beyond reason.
Lock the gate.
When Siddhartha is about to leave the palace, a strange fog appears, which makes all the palace residents fall into a deep sleep, and only his personal aide Siddhartha, who is still awake, does not fall asleep like the others. So they both immediately leave the palace. Arriving in a forest. Siddhartha accidentally sees people or grandfathers from a group of ascetic followers or people who have thrown away all the comforts of life in order to achieve spiritual goals, aka enlightenment, where Siddhartha immediately gets off his horse, cuts his long hair, which is a symbol of his princehood, and says goodbye to his beloved personal aide. Not long after, a beggar appears who claims to be cold. Without hesitation, Siddhartha immediately gives his grand robe, which is exchanged for rags. Then Siddhartha walks into the forest to meditate in search of answers, which, without him realizing, all the trees that Siddhartha does not pass bow down, right witnessed by the 5 ascetic followers who are there. As a result, these 5 people followed Siddhartha, who was meditating alone, until not long after, a sound of guguludug was heard, a sign that it was going to rain. And guess what was behind the bushes? A giant cobra protected Siddhartha from the wet rainwater so that these 5 ascetic followers officially became Siddhartha's first 5 students in search of the true purpose of life. For 6 years, Siddhartha and his followers lived in silence and never left the forest to drink. They got it from rainwater. For food, they ate grains of rice or green grass that was carried by the wind, or usually lying on the ground. They tried to overcome suffering by making their minds strong and forgetting their mortal bodies. Siddhartha suddenly realized what he had been doing for the past 6 years was the wrong path. So that, with a limp, the thin and emaciated Siddhartha walked towards the river and plunged into it while enjoying the fresh water. If the strings are set too tight, then they will break. If they are too loose, then they cannot be played, meaning the position must be exactly right according to the portion so that it can run smoothly, just like life. Do not suffer too much. Do not have too much fun. Live in the middle by enjoying what has been given.
Taste the proper food.
Feeling betrayed by their own role models, the 5 disciples of Siddhartha chose to leave and not follow him anymore. Siddhartha, who wanted to be more sure of the path he had chosen, put down a cup made of coconut shell and said, "If the path I take is right, then this cup will drift in the opposite direction." Some time passed after Siddhartha decided to live with the new path he had chosen. He did his final meditation to subdue his lust, where temptations came one after another, starting with the appearance of several singers who seduced him to drink, which turned out to be a devil figure named Mara, who tried to destroy Siddhartha's faith. Finished with the temptations from the singers, now Siddhartha is tested with a sea of gas, seasoned with flames. And yes, millions of archers appeared ready to release their arrows, where Siddhartha remained silent in his calm. And this is what happened. Shortly, Siddhartha saw himself emerge from the water. It was clear that it was an angry figure disguised to tease him after being absorbed deeper. Mara was nothing more than an illusion. Mara was a symbol of paired lust that existed in the human body. Once subdued, then it would forever obey. Siddhartha succeeded in subduing his own lust. Since then, he was called by the title Buddha. Returned to the present, the father woke up from his dream right when Lama Orbu died in his meditation. When the students were praying for their teacher, the father told about the dream he had just had, and after being validated, everything was exactly the same as the story of Buddha. So the father was quite nanglang tari, hearing the answer. 2 weeks passed. Jess and the father returned to America, bringing some of the ashes of Lama Norbu, who had been cremated according to procedure. Jess and her father and mother boarded a ship to throw the ashes in the middle of the ocean, and their family became harmonious. Relax, because what you sometimes imagine is not as bad and as terrible as reality. I, Max, representing Pertalite users, say thank you and see you in the next video. Adios, Pineapple Honey Underpants.